I want to be very clear when I cover this next story. It's going to be two parts. It's about Jussie Smollett. And he's an actor from the TV show Empire. And Daniel's going to be covering this story in the first hour, and then I'll be talking about it in Chicago Corner. And we have two different perspectives on it, but we agree, but we're looking at two different ways and just really how this story impacted a lot of people and the city of Chicago as a whole. Yeah. When we first saw this story come out, we made a decision to wait until all the information was available so that we can give a true opinion on it and commentary on what happened. There was a lot of media buzz around it, and people were jumping on this story, assuming that it was the way Jussie Smollett described it. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but I guess the truth did come out to where he was lying about it. And since me and Daniel and Paul, we live in Chicago, there was a lot of things about his story in the first place that was very questionable, but we wanted to wait until all the information was available. So, Daniel, let's hear what's really going on. Let's hear your perspective on what happened with Jussie Smollett and his now arrest or potential facing felony charges for his lie.
So let me just go over the facts just so we're all on the same page in case you've missed this story. So Kit already went over this. He was called the police, said that he was someone put a noose around his neck. Two guys came with Trump hats on. They were very homophobic. They were very racist. And they said at the end, this is MAGA country, and then left. And then he went into a hotel with a noose around his neck and a sandwich and proceeded to report this. So let's kind of go up to what's happening right now. So the police have put out a felony charge. I think he's since then turned himself in for disorderly conduct and filing a false police report. And there is actually video that they found of the two people that he did hire who actually worked with him on Empire, going into a convenience store or a hardware store and buying the rope and then another place to buy the hats and everything else. And if he's convicted of this crime, it would put him in jail. We know because he's rich, he's not going to serve this, but it would put him in jail for 1 to 3 years. And in when the press conference happened, the two people that he had hired at I think it was the 47th hour of the 48th hour that they could be held by the police, came out and explained that he had paid them in check, which actually reminds me to when Jerry Springer was mayor of, what was he, mayor of Maryland, Baltimore?
I believe so.
Cincinnati, that he paid a hooker in a personal check. That's exactly where my mind went when I saw that he had paid them in a personal check. That's never a good thing to do if you're trying to commit a crime. And they think that he should come clean and explain what happened. And so he, again, as I said, he made a claim that they put a noose around his neck. And again, what I said before. Now, here's the interesting thing. Here's where I think it gets very relevant to this show and what we're talking about. It seems like he did all of this because he wasn't happy with the amount that he was being paid on Empire, while simultaneously worrying that his character would have been written out of the show entirely. And so this seemed like, again, this is just with the evidence at hand, what we've seen. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it seems like he felt like he was becoming irrelevant, so he decided to make himself relevant. In fact, they even mentioned that before this all happened, he wrote a threatening letter to, I think, himself, and that didn't really go anywhere, so then he upped it to this. So it very much seems like he took people that he knew on Empire, made them dress like Trump supporters, have them put a noose around his neck so that he could go and say that he was a victim of a hate crime so that he would be more relevant in society. And if he was worried about being written out of the show, that would not come to the case, and he may even be able to get a higher paycheck since he's now more relevant. It turns out after all of this, and Empire was even saying that they weren't planning to write him out of the show. Well, guess what? They're writing him out of the stuff he's already done. He is completely out of Empire. The last 2 episodes, I guess there's 2 more episodes in the season, he's simply being removed from them. So in his goal of greed to get more gravitas, to get more of all these things, he ended up doing the very thing. He became the thing he was afraid of. He was afraid of being paid too little. He was afraid of being written out of the show, and by his own actions, he is now vilified and he's out of the show. I want to add one thing before I let you go, Kit, and that is that this, I think, is a very important discussion. That's all what happened. We just went over that. I think the argument now comes to what happened, because this didn't just affect him. This wasn't just some actor in Chicago. This was someone who was supported. You had people in the LGBT community reach out and stand with him. You had politicians reach out and stand with him. You had the African American community reach out and stand with him. You had all these people that were there for him for what ostensibly was just greed. And I think that the conversation we should be having on this is this movement, these movements that are happening, these movements that are trying to bring forth equality. I think this is a perfect example of what happens when things are based on just someone's word and we don't do verification. Is these things happen because now for the next 5 years, everyone on the right, anytime someone who has actually suffered from racial discrimination, from LGBT, for homophobia, for all these different things, there's now going to be every single right-winger said, but don't you remember that time in Chicago when that one guy made it up?
Right, and so here's another thing we got to look at too. First, Jussie Smollett, you were on a very popular TV show for 5 seasons. You had one point a lot of supporters and followers. Enjoy your slice of pizza and be happy, because you're living a life that very few of us get to live. You have instant celebrity, you have instant access to wealth and fame and all these other good things, but instead you decide to blow it away on greed. And a lot of people from various communities believed your story, because for a long time stories like this were cast aside. They were not believed. And now there's a growing movement, and you ruined that generosity that people had. People believed you because you were, an attack like that has happened to many other people, not at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is crazy, especially at below 20 degree weather. I mean, no. If you live in Chicago, I'll go in more detail about that later, but it's just saddening to see that this is what's happening. And this is also a lesson for all of us, to where, we really have to vet the entire story before we just jump to conclusions. I mean, already Kamala Harris and Cory Booker made statements on how that was a modern day lynching, and now they got to backpedal away from those comments. You had people in the LGBT community step up and say, this is wrong what happened to Jussie Smollett, and now the police evidence is showing that he made the whole story up. And it really ruins a lot of people and the generosity and goodwill for somebody who has been a victim of these assaults. So I guess with social media, with everything, especially with what we do here at Heartlands Media, how we cover stories, we have to really look at every single story, every single viral video with a fine-tooth comb before we can jump to any kind of media conclusions. It's important to believe survivors, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. But when you have somebody like this ruin the well of generosity and goodwill, you're creating an environment that's going to hurt many, many others. And basically, at the end of the day, what Jussie Smollett should do, but I doubt he'll do it, is 1, reimburse the Chicago Police Department for wasting resources on his lie, and number 2, give a huge donation to trauma centers and victim centers that have dealt with domestic abuse or real outside physical abuse, so that at least something good can happen. But right now he's facing jail time, and he's being written off the show. So congratulations, you shot your career in the foot. And I don't think there's really anything else to say about you, but I'll talk more about the timeline of this story in Chicago Corner. So Daniel, any final notes about this man?
So I think that, again, he's just one person in a big scheme in a country. One person doesn't ever really matter unless they affect other people. And in this case, I think this goes to a structural issue with the current movements that Jussie just happened to blow up and show for everyone what it is. And we always hear, which is true of that, with the old system where no one believed anyone, when a victim would come out, they would be laughed away. The police would just laugh at them. They do their rape test, and they would never do, still like 1 million rape kits still haven't been tested. All that happened, and then we had a moment where and we still are living in that moment where people are being believed. Now, that system is a system of trust that you only come forward if that's the case. And the reason that previously in the old system, why there were almost no people bearing false witness or making stories up, is because even if you were telling the truth, it was nearly impossible for you to get to a point where you got any amount of justice at all. So now that we're in a system where people are coming forward because the justice system has failed them, completely, and which is why Me Too, why all these other movements exist, because the justice system has completely forgotten them for decades and decades and decades. And so now you have these systems of come forward and speak the truth. And we've had a few cases previously in various groups where the cases haven't been fully truthful, or they've been perspective and not actual crimes. Mm-hmm. This is what I worried about. This is when you have a system that's just based on someone being able to come out and say something, you take that very, very, very minuscule amount of people who used to abuse the system, very, very minuscule, almost no one, almost zero, and you make it so that anyone that's taken by greed, that's taken by anything else that wants to become famous, anything, they now think that this is a ladder that they can use to rise, and it destroys this entire movement.
Right. And I also want to give a shout out to some of the people who are commenting on our chat right now. Grandma Christine, 42, powerful men want to show their power by getting away with doing forbidden things. A few other people saying he just wanted to be bad, that he wanted to use his power and stature, and
he wanted to be a hero.
Yeah, basically. And you know what? Maybe he's mentally sick. I don't know. He should get help immediately. But don't do this in our city. Yeah. Because Chicago has a sad history of corruption and hyper-segregation and racism. And for a lot of people, this was an open wound that still is not healing in this city. So we're going to move on, and that's what we're going to do.
Did you like that video? Are you not subscribed? Okay, you are now? Fantastic.